Hola a todos, me llamo Ryan. For those of you who do Edexcel GCSE Spanish, today I'm going to be running through the writing paper, higher tier. I'm going to be answering all three questions, and as I'm doing that, I'm going to be giving you tips and tricks and my general thought process. So, without further ado, vamos a empezar. Dale, aquí tenemos el papel. Here we've got the exam paper in front of us, and we have three questions that we need to answer in 1 hour, 20 minutes. So, plenty of time, no need to rush, means that we can check our answers as well at the end because we'll probably have time. So, we have one 90-word question, which is an overlap question, meaning that it's both at foundation and at higher. And we then have the 150-mark question and then a 10-mark translation. Let's tackle the 90-word question first. It's 18 marks. Those are split into 13 for content and like response to the question, and 5 for accuracy of grammar. So let me explain that a little bit more. Reading off of the mark scheme here, response to stimulus is worth 13 marks, meaning that you've addressed all 4 bullet points, you've frequently developed your ideas, and you have a comprehensible response. So, frequent development of ideas, meaning we have a lot of opinions, we have a lot of reasons why we have those opinions. Fine. So, the kind of phrases like diría que, pienso que, creo que, a mi modo de ver, para mí, en mi opinión, that kind of stuff. Additionally, we're going to need reasoning words. So, porque, ya que, dado que, debido a. That's going to be important in order to get a development of ideas. However, what I think is really important is this last bit that the response is comprehensible. And this is where I would say that clarity will beat complexity. Clarity is more important than complexity. Why? Because if your response is clear and it can be understood by an examiner, then you've got something credit worthy. So if the night before the exam there's something that you just don't get, I just don't understand how to conjugate the subjunctive, I just can't use it, or the present perfect doesn't make sense to me, you're not going to learn it in that one night, and it's better to avoid it because if the examiner doesn't understand what it is that you're saying, here it says for the top marks, an occasional message may be unclear. Okay, that's fine. But if there's multiple times where they're not sure what it is that you're saying, you're going to lose marks. And it's out of 13 here. So it's very important that what it is that you're saying is clear. On the other hand, you have knowledge and accuracy. So this is your grammar marks. You get 5 marks for using a variety of tenses, a variety spanning from the present, past, and future, and a variety of vocabulary and grammatical structures, including kind of complex language. So we're going to make sure that we try and include as much of that as we can. But at the same time, that our language is accurate and that we're avoiding as many major errors as possible. So without further ado, what have we got here? We've got this question on the gym. Not a big fan of that. Question on music. Okay. Write a blog post for a digital magazine about music and TV. Mention the following points. When you listen to music, your opinion of a TV show and why, what you watched last week, and a film that you want to watch in the future. So as you can see, we have 4 bullet points, and it'll be the same for both the 90-word question and the 150-word question. I would recommend reading both. So even though I'm going to go back and read the other one in a second, but all of them will follow a similar kind of structure. For 90 words, they're going to ask you something about what you do in the present tense. They're going to ask you about an opinion on something. They're going to ask something that you did in the past and something that you did in the future. And what they're doing there is they're making it as accessible as possible for you to access the top band for your grammar marks because you're using a range of tenses in the past, the present, and the future. Let's go back and read the other one. So Write a letter to your friend about healthy living. Mention the following points: what your exercise routine is like, your opinion on going to the gym, what you did for exercise yesterday, something you'll eat in the future to have a balanced diet. The reason I'm going to go for the second one is I think that the it's going to be a bit hard for me to get full marks and vocabulary here, particularly talking about things like what I did for exercise. I mean, you could say stuff like corri or um, nadé, as in I swam, I ran, because something like I did weights training yesterday isn't immediately coming to my head as to how I translate that into Spanish. And I think this question on music is just going to make it easier. Do make it easier for yourself. Pick the question that you're more equipped to answer with vocabulary so that you can show off your high level vocabulary and your high level complex language. All right. So let's go do this one. Let's read it again and then start to sort of form a plan around what it is that we're going to say. Mention the following points: when you listen to music, your opinion of a TV show and why, what you watched last week, a film that you want to watch in the future. Okay, so when you listen to music, that's the present tense question it's asking. Immediately, what jumps out to me is there's an opportunity for a kind of grade 9 idiomatic language phrase. And that is suelo ir, suelo plus infinitive. In this case, it would be suelo escuchar. So, suelo escuchar la música. The reason that that is a high level phrase is because there's not a direct translation for it. The translation is I usually do something, and it's the same as saying usualmente escucho la música. Usually I listen to music. However, this stuff like suelo plus infinitive, tengo ganas de plus infinitive, phrases plus infinitive are counted as complex language. So that I think also acabo de, I have just done something. Después de, all of that is stuff that you should have in your head on log, sort of that you can use in any question in order to get yourself higher marks. And just a note on this, the term idiomatic language, because you might have it in the mark schemes or in examiners' reports. Your teacher may have said, make sure that you learn an idiom. Learning idioms are fine, but it's also, you're not going to get full marks because you've said, es pan comido, or hay cuatro gatos, or somos uña y carne, or whatever you learn, right? They're good and they're examples of idiomatic language, but something like this is equally credited as an example of idiomatic language because you can't translate it literally, and that is then more complex. So cool, good to have your idioms, but make sure that you've got phrases like this as well because it might be difficult to incorporate your idiom. I'm not entirely sure how I'd incorporate es pan comido in response to any of these bullet points. So when you listen to music, suelo plus infinitive. Um, I'm going to say cuando when I'm doing something, or maybe when I am somewhere. Maybe when I'm at the gym, actually. In reference to the early questions, like cuando estoy en el gimnasio. And then also I'm going to give a negation as well. Negation. So I'm going to be like nunca. Why am I going to do that? Because it allows for sorry, it allows for another sentence, and it allows me to give a different sort of opinion, or well, to explain something that I don't do. Um, your opinion of a TV show and why. What am I gonna say? I'm gonna try and go for something a bit more varied. So instead of saying me gusta esta serie, me gusta whatever, I'm gonna say maybe me flipa / me mola. For why, I'm going to make sure that I give kind of two developed reasons. And your reasons, I mean, they can be something as simple as no sé, es interesante. But the thing is, that's not particularly sophisticated or high level. And so it's fine. But if you're looking for top level marks, you're going to want to say something a little bit more complex than that. So maybe something like, and it will give us an opportunity to use the imperfect tense as well. Um, por ejemplo, en el pasado veía esta serie con mi madre. Like in the past, I watched this series. I used to watch this series with my mom, and that's a reason. That's a valid reason, and we haven't necessarily just gone for one adjective. So that will help us in sort of in the development of our ideas, which is something that we need in order to get higher marks for content. So I'm going to say imperfect. Perfect. And just to remind myself, I'm going to say cuando era más pequeño. To remind myself that it's when I did it when I was younger. Right. What I watched last week. So I'm gonna for this, I'm gonna say something like, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not just conjugating a first person verb. So I might do that by saying not just me who watched something, we watched something. So maybe vimos. And to have the preterite, vimos una peli. Mi amigo y yo vimos una peli. And then I'm going to here, in order to develop the idea, I'm going to give some opinions. So maybe my friend thought that it was really exciting. And in order to say really exciting, I could say, like muy emocionante. But I'm going to try and use a more high level intensifier, that being isimo. So it was emocionantísimo. There you go. Very exciting, or like extremely exciting. Pero no estoy de acuerdo, which means I don't agree. And then like that, I've given two conflicting opinions. I've developed my idea, and that makes my writing a little bit more interesting. And then for a film that I want to watch in the future, obviously is asking me here to use the future tense. I'm going to try and use the subjunctive in here. So, for example, maybe I hope that I enjoy it. And going back to the idiomatic language, I'm going to use ojalá. This is a really good one. It's really good because sometimes the subjunctive can be difficult to gauge where we need to use it. However, you should know that you always use it after ojalá because you're expressing a wish or a desire. Because it just means, well, it comes from meaning God willing, but now in Spanish it means I hope or like I wish. So ojalá, I hope that I enjoy it, and just remember, ojalá, I'm just put lo disfruta. Okay, that being done, I think we've got a basic sort of plan of what I want to say. Let's get to writing. So, when do I listen to music? I don't know. I usually listen to music when I'm at the gym. Suelo escuchar a la música cuando estoy en el gimnasio. And then I said I'd give a negation, although I wasn't very clear on why. It's because it's another example of developing your idea. So I do something now, but I don't do it at a different idea, like at a different time. So, for example, I don't do it at home. Why? Because I share a room with my brother or something. So, um, let's get a nice kind of connective in here. However, we can say that like a variety of ways, but sin embargo seems the easiest. Sin embargo, no. And now, what we could do, we could say no escucho a la música. However, we've said that in the previous sentence, so we can use a direct object pronoun, saying instead of no escucho a la música, we could say no la escucho. And that means the same thing, it just means I don't listen to it. So no la escucho en mi casa. If that didn't make sense to you, if direct object pronouns are something that you struggle with, there's a very, very useful video on A Star Spanish's YouTube channel about that includes a section on direct and indirect object pronouns. It's very simple. Well, it's very useful. It's a very complicated thing, particularly indirect object pronouns, but it's explained very, very well by Mitchell. So I would recommend that, and I would post a link underneath this video. Sin embargo, no la escucho en mi casa. Let's give a reason why to develop our idea. ¿Por qué? What did I say? I share a room with my brother. Comparto. Compartir. Una. Now there's plenty of ways of saying room. Bedroom, I'll say habitación. Oh, actually, I'll say comparto mi habitación. I share my bedroom con mi hermano. Okay, that's it for the first bullet point. I don't need much more than that. Your opinion of a TV show and why? What have I got here? I said that I would use the imperfect as my reason. I'd use me flipa or me mola instead. So maybe I'll say something like I love telenovelas because when I was younger I used to watch them with my mom, and yeah, I think I'm going to say that. So how would we go about saying that? Well, let's start with I love. So me flipan, because we could say me encantan, but let's say this instead. For more varied, for a variety of language. Me flipan las telenovelas. Remembering that there needs to be an N because it's me flipan, like as in the telenovelas are pleasing to me is the kind of way that you should that you can understand that, and because like is a reflexive verb. Me flipan las telenovelas. Instead of saying por qué here, let's go for a bit of variety. Let's go for dado que. Me flipan las telenovelas, dado que I watch them with my mum. So again, we could say, now I watch them, I used to watch them. We're going to use the imperfect tense. So veía, remembering that ver is irregular. So you keep the E where for most verbs you wouldn't. You drop the ER, the IR, or the AR, and then add IA or ABA. However, for ver, that's a very, very common irregular verb. So, dado que veía. And now we can say veía las telenovelas con mi madre, pero I think using direct object pronouns and using pronouns in general is another indicator of more complex language. So let's instead say las veía con mi madre. Con mi madre. Cuando, cuando era más pequeño. When I was younger. Or when I was smaller, literally. Maybe I'll give another reason why as well, just to make sure that I'm fully developing my idea. And that also allows me to use a connective to show that I've got an expansive kind of grip of the vocabulary. So, además, furthermore. I don't know, what can be good about telenovelas? The plot. So the plot in Spanish is la trama. Además, las tramas. And now, obviously, if that was a word that you didn't know, then you wouldn't try and make it up in the exam. Maybe you'd say something like los personajes, like the characters. Or I always, or you could, you don't have to give something specific about them. You can say, I really enjoy them. However, if we're trying to develop, I'm trying to give something specific about what I enjoy about them. So maybe you could say something like they're funny, but again, this is a better way of giving a specific detail that about it to develop your idea. So, además, las tramas siempre son interesantes. Ok, me flipan las telenovelas dado que las veía con mi madre cuando era más pequeño. Además, las tramas siempre son interesantes. Now, I need to make sure that I actually give a specific TV show because I've kind of explained why, but I haven't really said what my opinion of the TV show is. I've given like a more specific opinion of TV shows or type of TV shows in general. And again, this is something really important to make sure that you don't get caught out by the wording of the question because you need to respond, you need to address all four bullet points, and your examiner may give you the benefit of the doubt. But if I just leave it like this, they might say he hasn't actually answered the question of giving a TV show, give an opinion of a TV show, because he's giving an opinion of a genre. And that kind of stuff is really annoying, but it's also because they need to make sure that you can articulate yourself as clearly as possible. And maybe this is an indication that I haven't understood the question properly. So just to make sure to avoid that, I'm going to say something like therefore my favorite show is, and then just give an example of a telenovela. Now, I could say mi telenovela favorita or mi serie favorita, but I want to go a little bit higher than that. I want to say the series that I like the most, which means the same thing, but it's just a more verbose or like eloquent, I guess, way of saying that. So, la serie que más me gusta, that is the show which I like the most, es una telenovela llamada, named, called, I guess. And then I had an example, Mar de Amor. I haven't actually watched Mar de Amor, unfortunately, so I can't tell you that it's my favorite show. I couldn't give it to you as a recommendation, even if I wanted to. Maybe you'll enjoy it. It's in Spanish, and a really good way to practice your listening, as I'm sure your teachers have told you, is to immerse yourself in Spanish TV, Spanish film, Spanish music. Just be around it. Um, Maybe watch Mar de Amor and see if it's worth watching. Okay, moving on to the next one. Next bullet point, what I watched last week. So what did I say? Is I was going to use the first person plural, we, in order to sort of vary it to make sure that I can show the examiner that I can conjugate not just the first person, but singular, but also the first, like plural. So vimos una peli. And I was going to give two different opinions on it, that and use an intensifier that my friend thought it was really, really exciting, but I don't agree. Okay, so what I watched last week, so la semana pasada. Mi amigo y yo vimos una peli de acción, an action film. Okay, so we watched an action film. Right, of course. Now I'm going to say what my friend thought about it. So mi amigo pensó, he thought que fue emocionante. But in order to add the intensifier onto it, isimo, I'm gonna drop the last letter and add on isimo. So, mi amigo pensó que fue emocionantísimo. Remember, it's not really a problem here because we're using it, we're synthesizing this language. We've picked the word emocionante. We should know what it means. But if you're reading and you come across emocionante or emocionado, that's a false friend, meaning that it does not translate to emotional, unfortunately, as much as you'd like it to. It translates to exciting. And there will be times in translations or in reading comprehension, like the paper 3, where they will intentionally add words like this in order to make sure, well, that some students, knowing that some students will trip up there, right? It's a false friend. Uh, Another thing that I'm going to add here is I've got an accent on the I, and that's important. And accents in general are quite important in Spanish because not only do they tell you where the stress lies, they can also be an important indicator of tense. So if you use an accent, so for example, here we've got pensó, it's really important that I have this accent because without it, there can be a bit of doubt, and that becomes a major error because the examiner's not sure if I'm trying to say pensó que, as in he thought that, or pienso que, I think that. So this verb's a bit irregular, so you can see there's a bit of a difference. But for example, the verb I speak, hablo means I speak. Habló means he or she spoke. So it's very important that when we have verbs, we make sure that we add the accents if they're needed, especially in the preterite tense. Otherwise, it can mess up our communication. And that's a problem because then we lose marks for accuracy of language and we lose marks for the comprehensibility, the ability of the examiner to understand what it is that we're saying. Okay. That being said, though, if I did miss this accent, that'd probably be an example of a minor error. And even for 5 marks, for top marks in your grammar, you're allowed to have some minor errors. So that's fine. Mi amigo pensó que fue emocionantísimo, pero yo no estoy de acuerdo. ¿Por qué? I've said por qué, I've said dado que, let's say ya que. Prefiero películas. Películas de amor. I prefer love films. Fine. Okay. Final bit now. A film that I want to watch in the future. I've said that I want to use the subjunctive. So let's say we can use the different types of future, for example. The conditional works here. So me gustaría, I would like to watch. And that works actually because we could either say quiero, I want to watch, or me gustaría, I would like to watch. And I think me gustaría here is a better example, is the better choice because now we're using the conditional tense as well, helping us get a range of tenses in our answer. So, me gustaría. We can say ver, but we could also say, for example, ir al cine. Cine. Para ver, in order to watch. La Or, well, we could say la nueva peli or la nueva película, or we could use a synonym for película in order to ensure that we have a variety of vocabulary, that we're not just repeating ourselves. So I'm going to say para ver el nuevo filme, which is another word for film. Um, F1. New F1 movie. I've seen it. I recommend it. But that's not what this is about. Me gustaría ir al cine para ver el nuevo filme F1. Let's give a reason why. ¿Por qué? And here we've got a good opportunity to use the present perfect. So, for example, I've heard that it's good. So, um, he escuchado que es genial. Or I've heard would be more like he oído. Me gustaría ir al cine para ver el nuevo filme F1 porque he oído. So again, we take this is an irregular verb, but for the present perfect, there's a whole list of conjugation again on the ASL Languages YouTube channel, where everything from the present perfect to the subjunctive to the imperfect is all covered on full conjugation. So I would recommend giving those a watch if you struggle with anything like that. Porque he oído que es genial. And then just to finish it off, I'm going to add in that nice little subjunctive phrase because they love to see the subjunctive. It's something that is very difficult to translate. Ojalá lo disfruta. I hope I enjoy it. Cool. This is a good answer. We've got some time, so let's just read over it. Suelo escuchar a la música cuando estoy en el gimnasio, sin embargo, no la escucho en mi casa porque comparto mi habitación con mi hermano. Okay, I usually listen to music in the gym. However, I don't listen to it at home because I share my room with my brother. Me flipan las telenovelas, dado que las veía con mi madre cuando era más pequeño. Además, las tramas siempre son interesantes. La serie que más me gusta es una telenovela. Ah, okay, good that I checked this. I was going to say therefore in order to kind of to add that connective to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense and to explain why. So, por eso, la serie que más me gusta es una telenovela llamada Mar de Amor. So, good that we checked over our work there. La semana pasada mi amigo y yo vimos una peli de acción. Mi amigo pensó que fue emocionantísimo, pero yo no estoy de acuerdo, ya que prefiero películas de amor. Cool. Didn't think it was that exciting. For the final one, me gustaría ir al cine para ver el nuevo filme F1 porque he oído que es genial. Ojalá lo disfruta. Good answer. Good answer. Shouldn't be more than 110 words. It's okay to go over the word count. It's not a hard limit. However, again, you don't want to go too far over the word count. Otherwise, you'll start to create a bigger risk for yourself. Because the more that you write, the bigger chance there is that you've written something inaccurately. And you're not getting extra points for writing more than 90 words. So it's great to kind of to show off a range, and maybe 90 words isn't enough to show off like that kind of range of vocabulary. However, it is also really important that you are as accurate as possible. And so making yourself concise will help with that. Okay, next question. Write a blog about festivals. Mention the following points: your least favorite festival and why, the pros and cons of celebrating festivals, a festival that you liked in the past, how you're going to celebrate festival next year. 150 words. Okay, let's read the other one. Write a blog about future work and plans, work and future plans. Your opinion on going to university, the pros and cons of having a part-time job, a job you wanted to do when you were younger, and what you'll do to earn money next summer. So again, for the 150 words, you can see that you've got kind of an opinion question, like a kind of present tense well, opinion. Here you've got a pros and cons question in both, I think. And then past and future. So you've got to have kind of present, and that's going to be built implicitly into your opinion and the pros and cons answer to those paragraphs. So I think I'm going to go with the first one. Both of these questions I think are quite doable. But I'm just going to go with the first one because I think this one's slightly harder. This one may be asking you in terms of festivals to think of some specific Spanish festivals that you can think of. If you can't think of any Spanish festivals, you know, like Dia de los Muertos is a good one to remember. I've got a couple from Spain that I'm going to include in this answer, like La Tomatina, Las Sanfermines. If you've never heard of them, it may be interesting. Like, it might be a good idea to have like at least one in the bank for maybe your speaking exam or your writing exam, so that it's something that you can refer to, especially if it comes up on the photo card. However, you could always just talk about something that is celebrated in all kind of in Catholic countries, because remember Spain's a Catholic country. So La Nochebuena, Christmas Eve, or La Pascua, Easter. Right, but let's get into this. So, mention my least favorite festival and why. I think here I'm going to talk about Las Sanfermines, which is a festival that's celebrated in Pamplona in the north of Spain, where they do this crazy thing where they run with bulls. Basically, they take these bulls, they run them down a street, and then they do bullfighting. I'm going to say I don't like that because I think it's dangerous. So let's talk San Fermin. I'm going to say I'm going to give two reasons. I'm going to say I think it's dangerous, peligroso, and then also maybe I'm going to use the subjunctive. Another reason to use a subjunctive, or another time where it's used, is when you're using an impersonal expression. So an expression where it's not about anyone in particular. So it is important that. Es importante que we do something. That que then triggers the subjunctive. So I'm going to remind myself, I'm going to write es importante que. And then I'm going to say something maybe about animal rights. So que protejamos. So there, remember that we need to use the subjunctive conjugation, and it's proteger. So protejamos. And the reason that it's a J is because in Spanish, especially for the subjunctive, but in general, when you're conjugating, Spanish likes to conserve the sound. And so because GE makes the sound G, it needs to switch to a J so that we have that sound ja. Otherwise, it would be protegamos. And they don't, Spanish doesn't like that. So it then switches the G to a J. Es importante que protejamos los animales en vez de abusarlos, for example. It's important that we protect animals instead of abusing them. So that can be my kind of reasons why I don't like Los Sanfermines. Okay, pros and cons of celebrating festivals. Well, maybe for example, we're going to use like a nice little lo bueno, lo malo. That's some kind of high level language. Give maybe three reasons in general. So two reasons, two pros, one con. So lo bueno, el turismo. And then la identidad. Right. Lo malo, maybe something simple. It's just really expensive. Caro. And yeah, give some opinions on that. Make sure that I do that. A festival that I like in the past. Here I'm going to try and include. So I'm going to say, in the past we went somewhere, and then, so maybe what's an example of a festival? La Tomatina. That might be one that you've heard of. La Tomatina is where I can't remember where in Spain they do it, but you just have a massive fight with tomatoes. You're just throwing tomatoes at each other. I wanted to go, but you have to book in advance in order to go there, which is I don't know. So if you're interested in that, you're going to have to book in advance. So la tomatina, and then I'm going to try and use the imperfect subjunctive. And that is the ara or the se, ara or se. I just prefer ara. So tuviera, pudiera, uh, comiera, that kind of stuff. I'm gonna I'm gonna try and use it. You don't necessarily have to remember like the full conjugation of this, because I'm gonna use it in a si. So si tuviera el dinero, if I had the money. Okay. Now, if even if you don't necessarily understand how to conjugate the imperfect subjunctive, that's a phrase that you can remember. So I remember there's one really, really good um, idiom, which I always had. It was my go-to idiom in my, whether it be my speaking exam or my writing exam. I'm going to share it with you all because I'm not a gatekeeper. Si pudiera aportar mi granito, granito de arena. So it's an idiom because it means if I could do my bit. So if I could literally translate it, if I could, I think, give or like contribute my grain of sand. So if I could do my bit. Um, but again, it's good to just have in your mind a couple of nice high level phrases that you can use. I'm not necessarily going to use this in this answer because it doesn't really fit, because this would be about something like how would you change your area, how would you protect the environment, something like that. But I would say in this, si tuviera el dinero, and then it's followed by the conditional. Asistiría a este festival cada año. Right? I'm going to try and say something like that. So I'm just going to write si tuviera el dinero. And then how am I going to celebrate a festival next year? I'm going to say, going to make sure that I use different tenses. So I'm going to use the kind of the boya, but then I'm also going to use the simple future. I don't know, maybe my sister and I are going to go to Poland to celebrate Christmas, to celebrate La Nochebuena con nuestra familia. That's an example of a festival. That's a tradition that is celebrated not just in Spain, in other parts of the world as well, but it should count for this question. So I'm going to talk about La Nochebuena. And then, in order to develop your answer, we're going to want to do something, say something specific. So I don't know, what am I going to do? Maybe I'm going to like visitar mis abuelos. We're gonna cenar juntos. And then also, I don't have space here, but maybe we're gonna ir a misa as well, go to mass. Okay, let's start. So, my least favorite festival and why? I can say the worst festival, I think, is the way that's come to my mind. Lo el peor festival para mí. And that's the same as saying my least favorite festival. I'm just saying the worst festival for me is el Festival de San Fermín. And then maybe say, I know that it's celebrated in Pamplona, so I could say, well, you can say que es celebrado, but in Spanish, it's better to avoid the passive voice. So instead of saying es celebrado, what you do is you treat this word, celebrar, you put it into the third person, so celebra, of the present tense, and you add a se before. And this means one celebrates it, or it is celebrated. You might have heard this in like se puede hacer, like it can be done. And this works with anything. So, la comida, se come el gazpacho en el sur de España, o se celebra el Festival de San Fermín en Pamplona. So, El peor festival para mí es el Festival de San Fermín, que se celebra en Pamplona. And then let's give a reason. Dado que eh, dado que las corridas de toros, which means the running of the bulls. I think there's another way of saying it. I want to say encierros, but I'm not entirely sure, so I'm just going to stick with this one. Las corridas de toro, de toros, because the running of the bulls, son muy peligrosas. That's good because I've got a sentence here with several clauses. And just to read from the example for you, from the mark scheme, some extended sentences. This is an example of an extended sentence. We've got 3 clauses here. Great. Okay. I also said I was going to use the subjunctive. So, adding on to that, es importante que es importante que protejamos in fact, I'm gonna add también here. También, just to show that I'm adding on to this idea. Es importante que. There we go. Protejamos los animales en vez de abusarlos. So, also, it's important that we protect animals instead of abusing them. Y por eso, I can't accept this tradition. No puedo aceptar esta tradición. Or like, you could also say, I don't agree. No estoy de acuerdo con esta tradición. But like I've already said that in the other answer. Not that the answers are marked together. You can repeat yourself. That's fine because they're marked separately. But just for the purposes of this, I want to show you there are different ways of saying things. So no puedo aceptar. Esa. I can't accept that tradition. Tradición. Nope. What I've done there is a perfect example of an error that someone will make when they're writing in a hurry and they won't necessarily check it. And then they'll be like, oh, damn, look what I've done. I've written it in English because they're very similar, they're cognates, and it will be marked quite harshly by the examiner. Make sure that you read over your work. Make sure that you don't do something like that. Tradición. No puedo aceptar esa tradición. Okay. Second bullet point. Hopefully I've got some more space here. Yep. The pros and cons of celebrating festivals. I said lo bueno, something about the identity, something about tourism, and then lo malo is that it's expensive. Okay. Lo bueno, so bueno de celebrar festivales. The good thing about celebrating festivals is que the identity you're celebrating, the identity of the region at the same time. Es que, and here we're going to need to use the gerund or the present progressive. You are celebrating. So, estás celebrando. We add ando or yendo. Because this is an AR verb, celebrar, ando. Estás celebrando. la cultura y la identidad de la región al mismo tiempo. That means at the same time. Tiempo. Asimismo is another connective, which means kind of furthermore. I'd like to add on to that. Moreover. Asimismo. And what I said about tourism. And tourism benefits the local economy. La región, so the region. Benéfica, benefits. Economically, so económicamente. Adverbs in Spanish, mostly, not always, but 9 times out of 10, end in ente. So económicamente. Again, that's an accent that's there for inflection. So if you miss it, that's a minor error. Benefica económicamente, because the examiner still understands very easily what it is you're trying to say. La región benefica económicamente due to the tourism. Debido al turismo que los festivales atraen. Let's give, to make sure so that we've rounded out our answer, let's give a con. No obstante, or en cambio, let's say en cambio. All ways of saying however. Lo malo es que puede ser, it can be very, very expensive. Puede ser muy caro. Again, we could say carísimo. Asistir. A esos eventos. Now, I've said events here, eventos, instead of festivales, because I feel like I've said festivales a lot, and there's not really a translation. I don't think fiesta is like, fiesta's more like party, so I don't think that's the right kind of translation that we're looking for. So, festivales is fine. Sorry, festivales is fine, but eventos is a nice way of going around it. Okay, third bullet point, a festival that I liked in the past. So, I could say maybe when I was 10 years old, my family went to visit, to attend La Tomatina. Then if I had enough money, I'd go every year, something like that. So, cuando tenía, because being 10 years old is an action that takes place on more than one date. It's a habitual action. You attend for a year. Cuando tenía 10 años, it works. The imperfect works there. Mi familia y yo went a España para asistir a la Tomatina. And then I can explain what it is. Un festival bastante famoso, quite famous, donde donde hay una gran batalla, like where there's a big battle, donde hay una gran batalla con tomates. Donde hay una gran batalla. You could also say Batalla grande, that also works fine. But there's some words, so grande can become gran, and you can put it in front of the noun. Some adjectives in Spanish work like that. Una gran batalla con tomates. Let's make sure that it's clear. Si tuviera enough money, so you said bastante dinero, suficiente, so we've already said bastante. Dinero. Let's just say más dinero. So, si imperfect is then followed by the conditional tense. Si tuviera suficiente dinero, I don't know, I would go every year, so I would say iría a esto. I don't feel like writing a este festival. I can just say to that, a esto. Cada año. Why? I don't know, because we had a really fun time, so we could say lo pasamos bomba. Ya que lo pasamos bomba. Okay. Could add another sentence in there to make sure that I've got another person's opinion. Yeah, sure. A mi padre. So for example, my father liked it a lot. Maybe even though he doesn't like to try new things. So, a mi padre, we're making sure that it's le gusta because it's a mi padre. That's another example of an indirect object pronoun there. Oh, well, le gustó, actually, because it's the past tense. You can say muchísimo to add in that nice little intensifier. Muchísimo, aunque, usualmente no quiere. O usualmente no quiere probar nuevas cosas. Okay. Final bullet point here. How am I going to celebrate a festival next year? Let's see. What did I say? I said I'm going to go to Poland with my sister. I'm going to use the boya. I'm going to use the simple future. I'm going to explain some things that I'm going to do. For example, visit my grandparents. So, el año próximo que viene. Que viene. Iré. I will go a Polonia con mi hermana para pasar, to spend la Nochebuena, which is Christmas Eve, con mis abuelos. And then if we say vamos a cenar juntos. We're going to eat together. Just to give like specific things of what we're going to do next year. Vamos a cenar juntos. Y luego vamos a ir a misa. No puedo esperar. I can't wait. Cool. And that's that done. Let's take another look at it. Okay, my least favorite festival and why.
El peor festival para mí es el Festival de San Fermín, que se celebra en Pamplona, dado que las corridas de toros son muy peligrosas. Okay. That's one reason. También es importante que protejamos los animales en vez de abusarlos, y por eso no puedo aceptar esa tradición. Good. Two good reasons as why it's our least favorite festival. That are more than just like es aburrido or something. Lo bueno de celebrar festivales es que estás celebrando la cultura y la identidad de la región al mismo tiempo. The good thing about celebrating festivals is that you're celebrating the culture and the identity of the region at the same time as celebrating the festival. Asimismo, la región beneficia económicamente debido, this means due to, it's a nice way of saying because that isn't because, debido al turismo, the tourism, que los festivales atraen, that the festivals attract. En cambio, however, lo malo es que puede ser muy caro asistir a esos eventos. Cuando tenía 10 años, mi familia y yo fuimos a España para asistir a la Tomatina, un festival bastante famoso donde hay una gran batalla con tomates. So, when I was 10 years old, my family and I went to Spain to attend La Tomatina. I've explained what La Tomatina is. Si tuviera, this is the really good phrase that we got in here, suficiente dinero. If I had enough money, and remember that's always followed by the conditional, iría a esto cada año. Oh, cada años, that's wrong. They were checking over it. Cada año. Ya que lo pasamos bomba, because we had a great time. A mi padre le gustó muchísimo, aunque usualmente no quiere probar nuevas cosas. Even though he doesn't like to try new things, he really liked it. El año que viene, next year, iré a Polonia con mi hermana para pasar la Nochebuena con mis abuelos. Vamos a cenar juntos y luego vamos a ir a misa. No puedo esperar. I can't wait. Okay, great. That's both of the writing questions done. Now we just have a translation to finish it off. First, looking over it, let's read it in English fully, make sure that we understand everything that's going on, make sure that we know what kind of tenses that we're going to be working with, and then should be a fairly quick translation. My sister and I like to have dinner at home. We normally eat a healthy meal with lots of vegetables. I think that meat is delicious because it has a lot of flavor. Last week I ate a whole pizza. In the new year, we're going to try new recipes to eat healthier. Sorry. So we have, what have we got here? My sister and I. So we know that it's going to be, it's not going to be me gusta, it's going to be nos gusta. We know that we have, for example, we've got an opinion here. This is all in the present tense. We've got a past tense. We've got in the new year. We've got future. Doesn't look like we've got any subjunctive, luckily. So we don't have to worry about that. Let's think of some key words that might be tricky. Whole might be a bit tricky. Recipes, that's a key word, key sort of vocabulary. Healthy. Although hopefully, if we're doing our flashcards or whatever, we should know these as well. When I first saw this, I really struggled with the word meal. Finding a way to translate that. But right, let's take a look. So, breaking it down sentence by sentence, my sister and I like to have dinner at home. So, a mi hermana, because if this was just my sister likes to have dinner, it would be a mi hermana le gusta cenar en casa. Now, it's a bit more difficult, more complicated because it's and me as well. So you might want to say a mi hermana y yo nos gusta, but I think that's wrong. In fact, it should be a mí, because when you're saying me gusta, it's just a longer way of saying a mí me gusta, because again, gustar is a verb that requires an indirect object pronoun. The best way to translate into English is that it is pleasing to me. So it is pleasing to my sister and pleasing to me to have dinner at home. So a mi hermana y a mí, because it wouldn't make sense to say to my it is pleasing to my sister and to I. So that's why we need to have a mí. Nos gusta cenar en casa. Great. We normally eat a healthy meal with lots of vegetables. Normalmente comemos. We eat. So meal translate is comida. So it might be like it's not necessarily the first word that you think of, because it also translates as oh gosh, also translates as food, but it means meal. I was thinking like comida, maybe plato, but plato is more dish. So normalmente comemos una comida saludable, healthy, con muchas verduras. So making sure that we've got the adjective agreement here because verduras is feminine, muchas also has to be feminine. I think that meat is delicious because it has a lot of flavor. Pienso que la carne, meat in general, but remember that we often use the article in Spanish where we don't in English. So la carne es deliciosa. You also need to know that carne is feminine. So in order to say deliciosa, porque it has a lot of flavor. Tiene mucho sabor. Sabor, saboroso means tasty. Sabor means flavor. Last week, la semana pasada, I ate a whole pizza. Una pizza. Whole. If you're guessing, you might say completa. I think they would probably accept something like that. But the word that you need to be looking for is entera. And I ate, that's the preterite tense. So comí una pizza entera. And that's it for that sentence. Great. In the new year, we are going to try new recipes to eat healthier. Okay. En el año nuevo, próximo feliz Navidad y próximo año nuevo. No, sorry, próspero año nuevo. Prosperous New Year. En el año nuevo, we are going to do something, is vamos a, infinitive. Vamos a probar. Probar means to try, but like to try something new, and particularly in the context of food. So vamos a probar. Nuevas. You can say recetas nuevas, nuevas recetas. Both work here. Recetas para. So to, if this can be translated as, if it also works to say in order to, para is the word that you're looking for. So probar nuevas recetas in order to eat healthier, para comer. And then healthier, healthy is sano, or saludable, but I use sano in this case. Más sano. Let's take one last look at it. My sister and I like to have dinner at home. A mi hermana y a mí nos gusta cenar en casa. We normally eat a healthy meal with lots of vegetables. Normalmente comemos una comida saludable con muchas verduras. I think the meat is delicious because it has a lot of flavor. Pienso que la carne es deliciosa porque tiene mucho sabor. Last week I ate a whole pizza. La semana pasada comí una pizza entera. In the new year, we're going to try new recipes to eat healthier. En el año nuevo, vamos a probar nuevas recetas para comer más sano. And that's it. That's all 3 questions done in under the time limit. Yeah.
Dale, este es todo para este video. Espero que haya sido útil para usted. If you would like access to the materials that I use during this video, you can head on over to gcsespanish.com, where you can download the paper for free. And if tutoring is something that you're interested in, head over to astarlanguages.com/tutoring. Otra vez, muchas gracias por verlo y adiós.